Now the question might be, why do we care about JavaScript? What can we get it to do for us? So the idea is the following. If this is a browser, when the browser reads the content of your web page, it will produce a tree. There is a HTML tag on top, then maybe there is a div tag, then maybe in the div tag there are various children, 2 div tags as children, and this one can have other children, a div tag and a p tag, maybe here there is a button, and so on and so forth. So there is a whole tree that is essentially the representation of the HTML that was loaded. And this tree has a name. It's called the DOM tree, where DOM stands for Document Object Model. And the idea is that JavaScript can access the tree and read and write it and modify it. And when JavaScript modifies the DOM tree, the changes are represented in real time on the browser window, right? So you can modify the content of the window by changing the DOM tree. So the way you actually animate or the way in which you make stuff happen in a browser tab is by changing the DOM tree underlying, okay? So in the good old times when this all started, every browser had its own DOM tree, because this DOM tree was invented not so much to make dynamic modification possible, but in order for a browser to be able to render a page, right? When the browser would load the HTML, it had to parse it, and then it had to construct the tree, just like when you parse a programming language, you construct its parse tree, and then you reason on that in order to compile it or interpret it or whatever you need to do with it, right? So it so happened that the various browsers had different, similar but slightly different representation for these parse trees for the HTML. So the DOM trees of, say, Mozilla and Internet Explorer and the other browsers of the era were not exactly the same. And JavaScript could work with one format of DOM tree but not necessarily with the others. This is why in the good old times we had many sites that we used to say it works with Internet Explorer but may not work with other browsers or whatever. So this was a real difficulty for developers, and so there was a library done that was a layer of compatibility for all DOM trees. The library has a famous name. It's called jQuery, okay? And it essentially enables you to write and read from the DOM tree in a way that is compatible with all browsers, okay? So as a simple example of what you can do with JavaScript, I want to show you a use of jQuery library in order to implement a very simple comment site. Now, I'm doing this for 2 reasons. The first is to demonstrate how jQuery works, and the second is to demonstrate the limitations of jQuery. jQuery is essentially a jack of all trades. By enabling you to look at the DOM tree and modify it in any way you see fit, it enables you to get basically any job done. Okay, so I want you to know that it exists as a solution of last resort for our class. In jQuery, it's as if you go back, I don't know, to the screwdriver, pliers, and saw kit with which you can fix up any house that happens to be made of wood, right? It doesn't give you the best way to design dynamic web pages, but it gives you a universal way to use them. Okay, so you should know it exists. It's very well documented. Well, it's somewhat well documented. The documentation is very comprehensive. And I want to show you how to build a very simple blog site using jQuery. So what I want is create a page like this. Okay, so this is behavior. I will show it to you first. I want to be able to say hello. And when I click add, I want this to appear as a comment. And then I want to say this seems to work. And when I click add, this should appear below, and so on and so forth, right? I just want to be able to add comments one by one. Notice the page is never reloaded, so I'm really using JavaScript to do this. Like, this is a simple dynamic page, and this works. So how do I get to do these actually? This way. So this is my page. The page reflects the initial state of the page, right? So this is the HTML at the beginning before any modifications. So let's take a careful look at it. First is the block for the page scripts. Here I say what I want to be loaded into the page. I want to load jQuery and I want to load index.js. This is the standard jQuery library, which I downloaded from the from its site and installed here. And this is my own code that I will show you next. Okay? And then I create a page that represents these not with the comments in, but rather in this blank state. Okay? And it looks like this. I have a div at the top with an ID of comments, which is the place where I will put the comments. So the various comments will be inserted here. Okay, once I click on the button. Here I have essentially, well, there is a bit of stuff to keep Bulma happy, but the basic thing is that I have an input field, okay, which also has an ID of new comment, and then there is a button that also has an ID of add button. So this creates the skeleton. There is some empty space here that you don't see at the top for the new comments, then there is an input field and a button. Okay, and all the dynamics is then done with a jQuery. jQuery works in this way. So this is the code I had to write. You see, jQuery has this $sign. I wonder if the creators became really wealthy. No, sorry, that's a joke. But this $sign is an alias for the jQuery library, and it's convenient because it's short. If I wanted, I could write actually jQuery in full. But, if you can, you just write a $sign. We all love dollars. So if you wrap a string around it, and this string happens to be a selector, this $this selector will select all the elements that match these. This is a bit like when you write CSS. For example, you could write this will match every div. This will match every div or everything of class block. This will match every div of class block. This will match anything with ID class add button. This hash sign is the ID. So this thing per se will match all the elements of the DOM tree that are of ID add button. And of course there is only one of them. If you look at them here, there is only this button that has the right class, the right ID. Okay, so this will essentially grab the button and it will add a click handler. This line is previous, right? And it will add a click handler, which means when you click with the mouse on the button, this function that I provide in the handler, okay, the handler goes from here to here, this function provided in the handler will start executing. Okay, so what do I want to do in the function? Well, let's look at it again. Okay, so I want to be able to say hello. And when I click the button, I want to take the string that is there, put it above, and remove it from the input field. So we need to do that. So how do we do it? So we do this. This is how we grab the content of the input field. Okay, the input field had ID new comment. Okay, so I grab it. This selects the element called with ID new comment, and this takes the value from it. This clears the field. I take it again, but instead of saying val without any argument, I say val with argument of an empty string. So this will clear the field, so that you can write the next value. Anyway, I have already gotten the value, right? Then this creates a div for where I will put the comment. Okay, I create a div that I will want to put in the DOM tree, but for the moment I don't put it anywhere. I create this piece of DOM tree that I just store in a variable. So you see this thingy that stands for jQuery is really very versatile, because I can use it both to select elements as I do above and to create new elements. If you give it a selector, it selects an element. If you give it a tag, it will create a new DOM element for you. So here I'm creating a new DOM element that is not yet part of the page. Then in this new div element, I set the text to be the new comment, okay? And then I take this div that is called comments, where all the comments go, and I append at the end of it as the last of the children, this new div. Okay? That's what I do. And it's instructive to see the changes in the DOM tree. Let's see if we can get it to view it in real time. So if I inspect these, okay, let me organize these windows a moment. But if I inspect these, you see there is this div with ID comments, and there is this block hello, and then there is the rest. And now I say ciao. And if I say ciao and I click on add, this new div here is added. Okay, so this gives you a very simple example of how to use jQuery to modify dynamically a web page. And the set of operations that you can do with the jQuery is very quite large. You can access the information present on the page, you can modify it, you can start network calls to get new information, you can do pretty much what you want. So the beauty of jQuery is that it gives you a jack of all trades that you can use in order to do whatever you want. The drawback of jQuery, and the reason why we use Vue.js and not jQuery for this class, is the following. See, this works, but the drawback is that once I put the comments in this list, once I say hello, ciao, and maybe hola, and I have these 3 comments, I don't have any data structure that represents the list of comments, right? It's extremely manual. All the information that is available is stored in the DOM tree. And if I store something in JavaScript, there is nothing that keeps my DOM tree and JavaScript in sync. No, I could very well modify this code, and in fact I can do that. No, I can have like let comment list is equal to an empty list, and then I could add to the comments when I have them. Okay, so I can not only do these, and I could say comment list dot push, which will extend it with a new comment. Okay, so I can do these, but there is absolutely nothing that will make sure that at all times my comment list will actually match what is in the DOM tree. Okay, so there is nothing that keeps the JavaScript representation in sync with the DOM tree. And every time it would be a very manual, labor-intensive job of making sure, okay, this comment has been added, it's not yet on the DOM tree, let me figure out, I have to update the tree. And maybe on the side of each one of these comments, I could put a delete button, and then I would have to say, okay, the delete button needs to remove the thing from the DOM tree and also needs to remove it from my comment list. And I would be every time trying to keep the 2 representations of the same thing in sync, the DOM tree and my JavaScript representation of it. What frameworks like Vue.js enable you to do is this. You can drive the DOM tree through JavaScript. You define essentially how the JavaScript, or at least how some JavaScript variables need to be mapped to the DOM tree. For example, you can say, hey, I have a list of comments, and for each comment I need to create a div. Okay? Then when you modify the list of comments in JavaScript, Vue.js, without you having to say anything, will update the list of things in the DOM tree, the list of divs in the DOM tree. And this connection goes both ways. So if you do changes to the DOM tree by, I don't know, pressing on buttons or doing other stuff, the change will be reflected in the value and in the activation of some of your JavaScript functions. Okay? So instead of having 2 separate universes, the DOM tree and the JavaScript, and have to make sure that they stay in sync, we will be having JavaScript driving the content of the DOM tree. That is the goal of Vue.js, which we will be present in the next videos.